A strange experience in the heart of the Amazon, a journey into the unknown. It was a night like no other. Ronnie, a seasoned electronics and computer engineer, had just finished another exhausting day of setting up his research equipment deep within the Amazon rainforest. His team had been working tirelessly, and he was finally ready to observe the strange phenomena that had been reported by the indigenous Yanawa tribe for years. Little did they know, the night would bring them face to face with something that would leave them questioning everything they knew about science, the unknown, and even the fabric of reality itself. As the group settled into their camp in the middle of the jungle, they had no idea that the next few hours would be a series of strange, unnerving events that would stay with them forever. Ronnie and his team had been preparing for this moment for weeks, gathering advanced equipment designed to capture any anomaly they could detect. Cameras, thermal sensors, radiation detectors, and infrasound equipment were all set up, ready to capture the unexplained phenomena that locals had reported. These weren't just ordinary observations. This was the cutting edge of UFO research, blending technology with a deep connection to the culture and beliefs of the indigenous tribes they were working alongside. The team knew they had something extraordinary ahead of them. The first odd experience began shortly after nightfall. The air in the jungle had grown eerily still, the dense canopy above casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Ronnie and his colleagues, along with a group of indigenous boys from the tribe, stood in silence, listening intently. It was a silence so complete it felt almost unnatural. The team had been trained to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared them for the strange sound that suddenly broke the stillness. It started as a soft metallic scraping, a sound that was so clear and intense it felt as if it was coming from right next to them, yet they were surrounded by nothing but trees. The noise was impossible to explain. The closest comparison anyone could make was the sound of a metal bed frame being dragged across a wooden floor, but there was no metal, no bed, and no floor in the middle of the jungle. The noise grew louder, then faded, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. A sense of dread hung in the air, as if the jungle itself had come alive and was observing them. The young indigenous boys, who had grown up surrounded by the natural world, seemed just as startled by the noise as Ronnie and his team. Their faces, normally filled with the calm confidence that came from their deep connection to the land, were now marked with an unmistakable anxiety. As the night continued, the strange sounds persisted. Ronnie, ever the scientist, began to hypothesize possible explanations. Perhaps it was an animal, or the wind manipulating the trees in a way he hadn't yet understood. But as the night grew darker, his rational mind began to unravel. The noises weren't just strange, they were unsettling. They seemed to shift, evolving from the sound of furniture being scraped to something more abstract, footsteps crunching through grass, the faint but distinct sound of something, or someone, moving through the dense underbrush. But the thing that unsettled him the most was the way these sounds seemed to come from all directions, converging on their small camp, as if they were being circled by something unseen. It wasn't just the sounds that had everyone on edge. There was something deeper, something inexplicable, a sensation of being watched, of being on the brink of discovery, yet too terrified to fully embrace it. Ronnie had felt it before, in the vast halls of research institutions, standing before complex systems of technology. But this was different. This was raw. It was primal. The unknown seemed to press in on them from all sides, and Ronnie couldn't help but feel the weight of centuries of mystery around him. As the group huddled together, trying to make sense of what they were hearing, one of the indigenous boys, a young man named Tupi, suggested they investigate the source of the noises. He led the way, his knowledge of the jungle guiding them through the dense underbrush. They walked for what felt like hours, the darkness swallowing them whole. Ronnie, who had spent his career in labs and controlled environments, felt out of his element. The jungle was alive in ways he had never experienced before. The air was thick, humid, and suffocating, and the only light they had came from their flashlights, which seemed to flicker as if protesting the very idea of illuminating the unknown. They reached an abandoned house deep in the forest, its broken windows and decaying wooden beams a stark contrast to the vibrant life surrounding it. As they stood outside, Ronnie felt the temperature drop. A chill ran down his spine, and he looked around nervously. The feeling of fear was palpable, but it wasn't just the house that unnerved him. It was the oppressive energy in the air, as if something was watching them from the shadows. Tupi and the other indigenous boys shared nervous glances, clearly feeling the same sense of unease. The house, once home to someone, now stood as a silent witness to the strange forces that seemed to permeate the area. They decided to enter the house, but as they stepped inside, the air grew colder. Ronnie's breath, visible in the dim light of their flashlights, came in sharp gasps. The feeling of dread intensified, becoming almost unbearable. It wasn't just the temperature or the atmosphere, it was something deeper. A primal fear, as though something ancient and powerful resided within the walls of this forgotten home. It was then that the team realized they weren't alone. Suddenly, the door creaked shut behind them, and they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps, coming from the back of the house. They froze, heartbeats pounding in their ears as the footsteps grew closer. But when they turned to face the noise, there was nothing there. The door was still shut, and no one was in sight. The sound had stopped as suddenly as it had started, but the feeling of being watched remained. The fear was real. Ronnie could feel it in his gut. This wasn't just a scientific expedition anymore. It was a journey into something far more profound, something that defied explanation. In that moment, he realized that the phenomena they were encountering were not just material, they were spiritual. They were connected to the very essence of the jungle, to the beliefs and culture of the Yanawa people who had lived here for generations. This wasn't just about studying lights in the sky or unusual sounds. It was about understanding a deeper, more mysterious force that linked the physical world with something beyond. The next night, as the team returned to their observation post, they were confronted with another bizarre event. Tupi, who had been observing the sky with Ronnie, suddenly froze. His hand gripped Ronnie's arm, his eyes wide with fear. "I can't move," he whispered. "My body is... I don't know how to explain it. It's like I'm trapped." Ronnie rushed to his side, but he too was paralyzed by the strange sensation that filled the air. Tupi couldn't move, couldn't even speak properly, his body as stiff as a statue. But his mind was racing. Ronnie knew that something inexplicable was happening to him. It wasn't just fear. It was something that seemed to reach inside and hold him captive. The entire group stood in shock, unsure of what to do, until after what felt like an eternity, Tupi regained movement. He was shaken, visibly affected by the experience, his eyes wide with the terror of what he had just felt. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. The phenomenon had left them with more questions than answers, and the sense of unease continued to linger. They had witnessed something far beyond the physical world they were familiar with. For Ronnie, this was no longer just a scientific investigation. It was a confrontation with the unknown, with forces beyond his understanding, and a reminder that some mysteries are simply not meant to be solved. As the team packed up and prepared to leave the jungle, Ronnie reflected on the experiences they had shared. What had started as an academic pursuit had turned into something far more personal. He had come to the Amazon to search for evidence of UAPs, but what he found was something that connected science with something far older, something spiritual. The experiences had opened his mind to the possibility that there are forces at work in the universe that we cannot yet comprehend. The line between science and the supernatural had blurred, and Ronnie knew that his journey had only just begun. In the years that followed, the strange events of that expedition would remain with Ronnie. The unexplained noises, the paralysis, the feeling of being watched, and the interaction with a phenomenon that seemed to know their every thought. These were experiences that could not be explained by science alone. They were reminders that there is so much more to the world than meets the eye. And for Ronnie and his team, the journey into the unknown was only just beginning. In the heart of the Amazon, far away from civilization, a fascinating intersection of science and indigenous culture emerges. Ronnie Ver, a Brazilian electronics and computer engineer, found himself deeply immersed in this vast, untamed wilderness, not only to investigate unusual phenomena, but also to understand the delicate balance between technological knowledge and the spiritual beliefs of the Yanawa indigenous tribe. As he navigated through the dense jungle, the reality of his journey slowly began to reveal itself in ways that blended the rational with the mystical, pushing his understanding of the world to its limits. When Ronnie first arrived at the remote Yanawa village, it wasn't just the jungle's overpowering sounds or the oppressive humidity that struck him. It was the ancient, almost otherworldly beliefs of the tribe. The Yanawa people live a life deeply rooted in their connection to the land, to the rivers, and to the trees that stretch endlessly toward the sky. For them, the natural world is not just a place of survival. It is an interconnected, living entity, teeming with forces that transcend human understanding. Ronnie, trained in the hard sciences, found himself in a world where explanations based on formulas and equations could not easily fit the experiences of the people he was now observing. From the moment he began his investigations, Ronnie's scientific mindset collided with the tribe's spiritual worldview. The Yanawa people spoke of Suum, a sacred tree believed to be a portal, a gateway where spiritual beings enter and exit the physical world. They told stories of luminous orbs and strange lights that descended from the sky, something far beyond mere natural phenomena. They did not speak of UFOs or extraterrestrials, but of sacred beings from the forest, entities that were part of the fabric of their world for centuries, perhaps longer. These beings, they believed, existed between the physical and the spiritual realms, often manifesting in forms that were invisible to the untrained eye, but could be felt deeply in the hearts and minds of the people. As Ronnie set up his equipment, installing high-tech sensors and cameras to monitor the UAPs, a sense of discomfort settled over him. The jungle was alive with an eerie presence that seemed to watch him, a feeling that was impossible to shake off. At first, Ronnie attributed his unease to the unfamiliar environment. After all, he was in the thick of the Amazon, surrounded by wildlife and conditions that could overwhelm even the most seasoned travelers. But as the days passed and the phenomena intensified, Ronnie began to feel a deeper connection between what his senses were recording and what the indigenous people had described for generations. The line between science and spirituality blurred as he witnessed phenomena that defied all conventional understanding. One evening, as Ronnie stood at the edge of the village, preparing his cameras for another night of observation, he was struck by a profound thought. The people he had come to study, the Yanawa, had no need for scientific tools to measure what they believed. For them, the sky was filled with stories, with meaning, and with the presence of beings that could not be touched but were deeply felt. Yet here he was, surrounded by complex gadgets and instruments, trying to capture what they had known instinctively for centuries. He wondered if these two worlds, science and spirituality, were not so different after all. Was it possible that his instruments, designed to capture the invisible, were simply his way of trying to understand what the Yanawa had long known? Could it be that the glowing lights and strange occurrences he was recording were not just inexplicable events, but rather manifestations of something far older, far wiser than modern science could explain? The Yanawa spoke of the Suum tree as a spiritual gateway, but as Ronnie ventured deeper into their beliefs, he couldn't help but think that perhaps science, with its intricate tools and precise measurements, was its own kind of gateway. A gateway to understanding the world in a different way. To the Yanawa, the forest was a living, breathing entity, and everything within it had a spirit. The trees, the animals, the rivers, all were connected through an invisible thread. In a sense, their view of the world mirrored the way scientists approach the universe, seeking connections and patterns in the vast, seemingly chaotic expanse of space. The Yanawa had their own language for these connections, spirits, forces, energies, but at the heart of it, they were searching for the same answers. What is this world made of? What is our place in it? Ronnie's experiences began to echo these ancient questions. One night, as he and his team observed the glowing lights from the UAPs in the distance, something extraordinary happened. The lights seemed to move with intent, responding to their presence. It was as if the phenomena were aware of them, aware of their thoughts and actions. This was the moment when the boundary between science and spirituality felt most fragile. Ronnie had spent years studying electromagnetic fields, infrared sensors, and cosmic rays. But in this moment, he felt an entirely new kind of energy in the air. It was not measurable in volts or amperes, but it was undeniable. The UAPs, whether they were from another world or simply another dimension, seemed to be responding to something deeper, something that went beyond the physical realm of measurement. The Yanawa's belief in the forest spirits suddenly didn't seem so distant from Ronnie's scientific training. Perhaps, he thought, these beings were not extraterrestrial visitors, but rather part of a larger, unseen universe that humans had yet to comprehend. Could it be that their understanding of the world, based on centuries of oral tradition and experience, was as valid as the data he had gathered through his senses? The more Ronnie thought about it, the more he realized that the division between what was seen and what was unseen, between science and spirituality, was not as rigid as he had once believed. The forest was alive with energy, and the UAPs, with their ethereal glow, might be part of that energy, a manifestation of forces that humans could only begin to understand. But there was also a sense of unease. The deeper Ronnie went into his research, the more he felt the weight of the Yanawa's beliefs pressing down on him. They had warned him about the Suum tree, about its power, about its ability to reveal things that might not be ready to be understood. The very thought of the tree, with its supposed connection to the spiritual world, made Ronnie uncomfortable. Could it be that he was poking too deeply into forces that were not meant to be disturbed? Could science, with all its tools and logic, ever truly understand the vast, intricate web of life that the Yanawa had lived with for generations? As he continued his research, Ronnie could not ignore the growing sense of awe and reverence he felt for the tribe's understanding of the world. Their wisdom, passed down through the ages, seemed to contain answers that his high-tech equipment could not capture. Perhaps, he wondered, this was the real gift of the Amazon, the chance to bridge the gap between two vastly different worlds. On one side, the raw, unyielding power of nature. On the other, the ever-expanding knowledge of science. For the Yanawa, these two worlds were never separate, but interconnected in a delicate balance that had sustained them for centuries. Ronnie's time in the Amazon had changed him. He had gone there with a scientific mindset, determined to unravel the mysteries of the UAPs, but he had left with a new understanding. The intersection of science and spirituality was not a battleground, but a place where both could coexist, where the rational could complement the mystical, and where the unknown could be approached with both reverence and curiosity. The Yanawa had known this all along. Their connection to the land, to the spirits, to the forces of nature, was not something to be measured or understood in the traditional sense. It was something to be felt, to be experienced, to be lived. As Ronnie returned to his life in Brazil, he knew that his journey was far from over. The data he had collected, the images he had captured, and the stories he had heard from the Yanawa were just the beginning. There was still much to learn, much to explore. But now, Ronnie understood that the answers he sought might not always be found in the pages of scientific journals or through the lenses of his instruments. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries come not from looking deeper into the universe, but from looking closer to home, into the hearts and minds of the people who have lived with these mysteries for generations. And in that, perhaps, he had found the most profound discovery of all. In the heart of the Amazon jungle, where modern technology meets ancient traditions, Ronnie Vere embarked on a mission to uncover some of the most mysterious and unexplained phenomena ever witnessed. A Brazilian electronics engineer by profession, Ronnie was not only seeking to collect scientific data, but also to bridge the gap between Western science and the profound spiritual beliefs of the Yanawa people. However, as he quickly discovered, this was not going to be a straightforward mission. It was a journey that would push his skills, resilience, and understanding of both the natural and supernatural worlds to their limits. From the moment Ronnie set foot in the remote village, a deep sense of curiosity drove him forward. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment, high-resolution cameras, thermal sensors, cosmic ray detectors, and more, he was determined to capture data that could shed light on the peculiar phenomena that had long intrigued local communities. But as the days passed, it became clear that this was not just a scientific endeavor. The forest, with its thick foliage and uncharted territory, seemed to have a will of its own, almost as if it were guarding its secrets. The challenge of setting up his equipment in such an unforgiving environment was no small feat. With no specialized labor or tools, Ronnie found himself alone in the vast, uncharted wilderness, building makeshift stations to monitor the skies. The heat was unbearable, the humidity suffocating, and the days were long. From sunrise to sunset, Ronnie worked tirelessly, pushing through exhaustion, his mind constantly racing with the question: would he be able to capture any concrete data on the anomalies? There were moments of doubt. The jungle was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by strange sounds that seemed to echo from every corner. On more than one occasion, Ronnie thought he heard something moving in the distance, yet when he ventured to investigate, there was nothing there. The uncertainty gnawed at him, the feeling of isolation and vulnerability creeping in. The path he had chosen was a dangerous one, but the pull of discovery, the allure of uncovering something extraordinary, kept him moving forward. The deeper he ventured into the jungle, the more the line between reality and the unknown began to blur. He started hearing noises that defied explanation, scratching, scuffling, and even furniture-like sounds, all coming from an unseen source. The fact that he was miles away from any village or settlement only added to the sense of dread. These weren't the sounds of animals or the wind. They were too specific, too deliberate. For a moment, Ronnie felt a sense of unease like never before. The forest felt alive, and yet it wasn't just the flora and fauna that seemed to be watching him. Something else was there, something invisible, yet undeniably present. That night, as he sat with his indigenous guides, young boys from the village who had volunteered to assist him, Ronnie couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship. The boys were fearless, having lived their entire lives surrounded by the mysteries of the Amazon. They had grown up hearing stories of the beings who resided within the forest, of lights in the sky and strange happenings that could not be explained by mere human understanding. As they sat together in silence, waiting for something to unfold, Ronnie found himself reflecting on the deep connection these people had with their land. They were not just witnesses to the phenomena, they were part of it. The forest, the lights, the entities, they were all woven into the very fabric of their lives. It was then that Ronnie began to feel something beyond the scientific excitement of his mission, a deeper, more personal connection to the mystery he was chasing. As he worked through the night, setting up cameras and preparing his equipment for the coming observations, he realized that his quest for understanding was no longer just about capturing data. It had become a search for something greater, something more profound. What he was encountering here in the jungle wasn't just a phenomenon to be analyzed, it was a mystery that needed to be respected, a riddle that required not only scientific inquiry, but also a recognition of the spiritual beliefs of those who had lived in harmony with the land for centuries. The very next night, as Ronnie prepared his equipment for the next round of observations, something extraordinary happened. The boys had wandered off to the edge of the forest, and Ronnie, alone at the monitoring station, was about to get a glimpse of what he had been searching for. A bright, pulsating orange light appeared in the sky, moving slowly and deliberately just above the treetops. The light was not like anything he had seen before. It wasn't a plane, it wasn't a helicopter, it was something else entirely. As Ronnie observed it, he couldn't help but feel a mix of wonder and apprehension. The light moved in a pattern, circling the village and then retreating into the forest. What happened next only added to the mystery. Ronnie's equipment, his carefully calibrated cameras and sensors, failed to capture the phenomenon in any usable form. The object had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Ronnie with nothing more than a sense of awe and a nagging feeling of frustration. The phenomenon seemed to be aware of him, aware of his attempts to capture it, and it didn't want to be caught. It was a chilling reminder that the world he was exploring was not one bound by human logic and understanding. It was a world where the rules of science and even time didn't always apply. As he sat in the darkness, reflecting on what had just happened, Ronnie felt a mixture of wonder and fear. The forest around him seemed to hum with energy, the air thick with the weight of something unspoken. Was it possible that this phenomenon was aware of his thoughts? Did it respond to his actions? He thought back to the stories the indigenous people had shared with him, their belief in the beings of the forest, the spirits that moved in and out of their world, often undetected by human eyes. Could this be what he was witnessing? Was it possible that science and spirituality, two forces often at odds, were coming together in this mysterious place? In the days that followed, Ronnie began to realize that his work was not just about gathering data. It was about understanding the broader picture, a picture that blended the rational with the irrational, the scientific with the spiritual. The more he learned, the more questions arose, and the more he sought answers, the more he felt like a visitor in a world that was much older and much wiser than his own. As the expedition continued, Ronnie became more deeply entrenched in his mission, but it was clear that the journey he had embarked on was not just a physical one. It was a journey of the mind, of the spirit. And as he sifted through the data, sensors that recorded unusual electromagnetic activity, cameras that failed to capture moving objects, and his own personal experiences, he realized that the answers he sought might never come in the form he expected. The truth about these phenomena might lie not just in the equipment he used, but in his ability to open his mind to the possibilities, to accept that there are things in this world beyond human comprehension. The difficulty of gathering conclusive data in such an unpredictable environment was undeniable. Yet, the experience of being in the Amazon, surrounded by its timeless mysteries, was something that could not be measured in gigabytes or degrees. Ronnie's journey was a reminder that there are things in this world that cannot be understood through logic and technology alone. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from what we can see or measure, but from what we can feel, what we can sense, and what we can imagine. As Ronnie prepares to return to the Amazon in the future, he knows that his quest for understanding is far from over. The data he has collected, the experiences he has had, and the questions that remain unanswered will continue to shape his work and his worldview. But more than anything, it is the profound connection between science and spirituality that he will carry with him as he seeks to uncover the mysteries of the world, one question at a time. In the dense jungles of the Amazon, surrounded by the rich traditions of the Yanawa indigenous tribe, Ronnie Ver found himself in the midst of a discovery that went far beyond what he had initially set out to investigate. His journey, which began as a quest to unravel the mysteries of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, in the remote regions of Brazil, soon evolved into something more profound. A journey into the unknown where science met the spiritual beliefs of ancient cultures. As he navigated through this wild and unpredictable landscape, Ronnie's future plans were shaped not just by data and facts, but by a deep-seated desire to understand the profound relationship between the natural world, science, and the unknown forces that might be at play. After months of rigorous preparation, Ronnie found himself in the heart of the Amazon, armed with sophisticated equipment and a determination to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences reported by locals. However, as he spent more time in the jungle, his perception of the phenomena he was investigating began to shift. It wasn't just about capturing data or recording anomalous events. It became about understanding a deeper, more complex connection between the tangible and the intangible. Ronnie's curiosity grew into a hunger for something that lay beyond the conventional limits of science. The pull of the unknown was no longer a mere intellectual pursuit. It became a deeply emotional experience. Throughout his expedition, Ronnie encountered a range of phenomena that seemed to defy logic and reason. He witnessed objects in the sky that blinked with an almost intelligent awareness, danced on the edge of his vision, and disappeared when he tried to approach. He recorded strange atmospheric disturbances, like a luminous fog that took the shape of a hand, pointing toward the forest as if directing his attention to something deeper. But more than the strange objects in the sky or the odd sounds in the jungle, it was the sense of connection. The idea that these phenomena were aware of him, aware of his thoughts, and perhaps even aware of his intentions, that left a lasting impact on him. Ronnie's next steps would not just involve more data collection. They would center around this new understanding of the world, one where science and spirituality seemed to merge, where the mysteries of the cosmos interacted with the age-old wisdom of indigenous beliefs. He planned to continue his research, delving deeper into the strange occurrences that had become a regular part of life in the Amazon. But he knew that the path ahead would not be an easy one. The weight of what he had experienced was heavy, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead created an undercurrent of unease that he couldn't ignore. The questions that haunted him the most were not the technical ones about the specific nature of the UAPs he had observed. Rather, they were the existential questions. What does this mean for humanity? What are we truly witnessing? Is there a deeper connection between the forces of nature, the consciousness of the universe, and the ancient beliefs of indigenous cultures? It was one thing to see a flashing light in the sky or to hear a strange sound in the forest, but it was another to consider that these phenomena might be a message from something beyond our understanding, something that could not be contained within the frameworks of science alone. For Ronnie, the emotional toll of this journey was significant. He had come to the Amazon with a clear purpose: to observe, record, and analyze. But as he witnessed the reactions of the Yanawa people who had lived in harmony with the land for centuries, he realized that there was something more profound at play. Their understanding of the events unfolding around them was not based on cold, hard data or scientific experimentation, but on something far older: a deep connection to the land, the forest, and the unseen forces that governed their world. Ronnie could not help but feel a sense of admiration for the way they lived, the way they saw the world not as separate from them, but as a living, breathing entity that was intertwined with their own existence. This realization was both humbling and awe-inspiring. It made Ronnie question the boundaries of scientific exploration. He had always been a skeptic, grounded in the tangible and measurable, but the more he spent time in the jungle, the more he realized that some things could not be explained with mere numbers and equations. There were forces at play that existed beyond the visible spectrum, beyond the limits of our senses and instruments. To truly understand them, Ronnie had to let go of his conventional thinking and embrace the possibility that science and spirituality might not be two separate realms, but two sides of the same coin. As he moved forward in his research, Ronnie made it clear that his future plans were not just about collecting more data. He intended to explore the intersection of science and spirituality more deeply, to integrate the insights he had gained from the Yanawa people into his understanding of the phenomena he was studying. He was no longer merely a scientist. He was a bridge between two worlds, the world of the rational and the world of the mysterious. He recognized that his research had the potential to open up new pathways for understanding the universe, not just through the lens of science, but through the lens of human experience. In the coming months, Ronnie planned to revisit the Amazon, armed with even more advanced equipment, but also with a deeper sense of awareness. He had already begun to notice patterns in the phenomena he was studying, patterns that suggested the presence of an intelligence, a consciousness, behind the UAPs. These patterns were not random. They responded to human presence, to human thought, to human intention. Ronnie's next steps would involve testing these hypotheses, pushing the boundaries of what we know about UAPs and the forces that govern them. But even as he prepared for his next journey into the jungle, he was keenly aware of the challenges that lay ahead. The terrain was unforgiving, and the phenomena he was investigating were unpredictable. It was one thing to observe strange lights in the sky, but it was another to fully understand the nature of those lights. Were they extraterrestrial in origin? Were they natural phenomena that science had yet to explain? Or were they something entirely different, something that transcended our understanding of the world? Ronnie's emotional state was a mix of excitement and trepidation. The closer he got to understanding the truth, the more he realized how little we truly know about the universe. The questions he was grappling with were profound and unsettling. What was the purpose of these phenomena? What role did they play in the grand scheme of the cosmos? Were they a sign of something larger, something that could change the course of human history? Despite the uncertainty, Ronnie remained determined. He knew that his work was far from over. His discoveries in the Amazon had only scratched the surface of a much larger mystery. He was committed to uncovering the truth, no matter how elusive it might be. And as he prepared to return to the jungle, he felt a deep sense of connection to the people who had welcomed him into their world, the Yanawa tribe. Their wisdom, their understanding of the natural world, had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never considered before. As he sat in his lab, surrounded by data and recordings, Ronnie thought about the journey ahead. The road would be long, filled with uncertainty and challenge, but he was ready. He had a responsibility not only to the scientific community, but to the people of the Amazon who had trusted him to explore the mysteries that lay hidden in their world. And with that responsibility came a sense of urgency. The answers he knew were out there, waiting to be discovered. It was up to him, and to those who followed, to continue the search, for the sake of science, for the sake of humanity, and for the sake of understanding the vast, mysterious universe in which we live. Ronnie Vare's journey was far from over, but he had taken the first step, one that would lead him, and all of us, toward a new understanding of the world and our place within it. His quest was not just for knowledge, but for meaning, a meaning that transcended the physical and reached into the realm of the spiritual, the unknown, and the unexplained. It was a quest that would shape his life, his work, and perhaps the future of human understanding itself.